Have you seen The Matrix?
I've heard it said more and more that the concept of irony itself is dead. The world has just gotten too dumb. Squid Game has always been a deeply ironic product. It was originally written based on Hwang Dun-hyuk's experiences with poverty and debt, a story that emerged out of his own struggles with a financial crisis and a need to support his family. It was a piece of art made to communicate an experience, but it was also content he hoped to sell as a way of getting out of his situation. When he was scouted by Netflix, it was both exactly what he'd hoped for, but also a source of immense pressure. The process of single-handedly writing and directing the entire series ultimately cost him his physical and mental health, and also several teeth. Added to Netflix's blatantly predatory deal with Hwang, resulting in him getting no residual payments or ownership of his own work, and it's hard not to see the parallels with the original story. People pushed into subjecting themselves to abuse and neglect for the profit and entertainment of a corporate billionaire class. Following the show's massive international success, that same corporate billionaire class started unironically recreating Squid Game. Companies and influencers cynically capitalized on the story in ways that obviously demeaned any artistic intent of its original creator. It was as if an entire class of people wanted to look Hwang Dun-hyuk in the eye and remind him that there was no meaning in his pain. It was just more dumb, meaningless entertainment, and the only value it had was monetary to the people who actually got the good end of his deal. In other words, the exact same people his work was trying to criticize. When Hwang was asked directly what inspired him to even make a second season despite these problems, he gave a one-word answer: money. I can't deny I've gotten weirdly emotional about this whole dynamic, especially in the wake of Squid Game Season 2 being released. Today I'm going to talk at length about this dynamic and about the second season of Squid Game, but I want to make one thing absolutely clear. Ready? This video will not include any attacks on Mr. Beast or the Mr. Beast Corporation. Mr. Beast is an amazing entrepreneur, and I absolutely deserved the community strike I received for criticizing him on this channel. I do not wish to lose my primary source of income. I'm merely a vessel to provide background audio to keep your brain distracted, and you should take no meaning from anything I say. Did I also mention my spouse is pregnant? Please consider crowdfunding our child via tips on Patreon or Ko-fi. Hey, does anyone else think Squid Game made some good points? On an unrelated note, have you considered getting a wallet? I share my wallet with my spouse. I just don't usually need two wallets. And I tend to procrastinate on any purchase that isn't strictly necessary. And also I like the colours. But you know what else comes in a range of nice colours? Wallets by today's sponsor, Extra. Except their wallets also come with certified premium leather, RFID wireless theft protection, extra space for cash and up to 12 cards, and it makes me feel like a man when I put it in my pocket. Wait, no, where did Extra also offers a tracker card, which is very useful for someone who constantly loses their most valuable possessions, not that I would know. A simple credit card sized accessory that can easily locate your items on a worldwide lost and found network with integrated voice activation with Siri, Google, and Alexa. It is also powered by the sun, and only 3 hours of charge can last you 2 full months. Extra also offers a key case and card holder pro, which provide more slick ways to keep together your things, and they also come in several colors. This one is in red. The Valentine's Day sale offers up to 30% off, and if you use my discount code below, you can unlock additional savings with your purchase. Be a good, cool guy like I am. Thank you. The Squid Game Happy Meal comes with your choice of a burger or McNuggets, along with fries, a drink, special Korean barbecue sauce, and an authentic Dalgona cookie from the hit TV show Squid Game. I've been thinking a lot about the Squid Game Happy Meal. Specifically, I've been thinking a lot about the hypothetical child that actually has the Squid Game Happy Meal and then assumes based on that the show is, you know, this fun thing about dolls and candy, and then decides to watch the show.
If you don't pay it off by next month, I'll take one of your kidneys. And then, after that, I'll take one of your eyes.
Now, I'm not really thinking about this in a won't somebody please think of the children way. I can see a parent's perspective having their kids suddenly beg them to watch a show about constant death and torture because a corporation thought they could make more money by pitching it as this colourful, kid-friendly thing. But I also was a kid, and I remember being interested in things that were way outside of my age bracket. I probably shouldn't have watched the South Park movie when I was 6 years old, but yeah, I'm sure 80s kids wanted to see Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm sure elder millennials wanted to see It. When I visited my brother-in-law, his kid was extremely excited to talk to me about FNAF. And I understand there are many things that are more harmful to children than getting a misleading impression of a TV show based on marketing. Like, probably the inherent concept of directly marketing McDonald's meals to children. Or McDonald's using child labor.
The fact that 10-year-olds were working was a bit surprising to me.
My takeaway isn't really about the corruption of the youths or anything like that. I'm sure Logan Paul is doing that job for them. That doesn't count, YouTube. That doesn't count. What I think the Squid Game Happy Meal represents is just how pop culture works. Art is notoriously hard to define, but on a basic level, I think we see it as a thing that is made for something beyond a strictly practical application. Most everyday appliances could be art, but the thing that makes it art isn't just whether it toasts toast. But none of this matters when you boil it down to the fact that in our present day, art is still a product. And when a product becomes popular, it gets diluted into general popular culture, and then the exact details of the thing tend to fade into the background. In the case of art, details which can include what the thing is about.
I love Squid Games. If you guys have not binge watched the new Squid Games, oh my god, what are you doing? It was amazing. Did you watch it, Edward?
Yeah, but you didn't watch it though.
What do you mean I didn't watch it?
She dropped the remote.
What do you mean I didn't watch it?
You liar, you guys.
It was so good. I watched every bit of it, okay?
Squid Game is a story about a financially irresponsible gambler being roped into a game show that involves its contestants being brutally murdered for the amusement of a wealthy elite.
You're all mine.
It speaks to the cruelty that emerges out of a society built around personal profit, both the cruelty people are able to inflict when their wealth puts them above any consequences for their actions, and what they're willing to suffer when they don't have that wealth. You can see this reproduced in real life, as I've covered in other videos. So back when most people who knew about Squid Game were just people who watched it, its meaning was pretty clear. It became both a unifying image for protest against exploitation and a useful shorthand for people to talk about their experiences and view on society. A protest for workers' rights in South Korea made global headlines in part because of a direct appeal to the show. This became its place in culture. In the way people recognize oppression under a government and call it 1984, people recognize oppression under capitalism and call it Squid Game. Then that other stuff happened. There was the Netflix Squid Game reality show where 456 actual real-world people competed for $4.6 million real-world dollars.
Oh my god!
Executives highlighted and actually gloated about recreating the stakes of the original game with a large cash prize.
What is the jeopardy that you put into those games, both sort of physically and psychologically?
Fortunately, we came up with a solution. $4.56 million. It is the most ambitious, slightly crazy idea that anybody's ever had for a show.
People were genuinely going, well, I want to be here because this is how I've got to where I am. This is what my real life is like. It was just very, very moving. It's a really, really emotional game.
Contestants admitted in the show that they are often sacrificing their jobs or education to be there for a chance to win.
And did you graduate?
No, ma'am. I dropped out to come here.
Contestants admitted that if they didn't win the grand prize, they wouldn't be compensated at all.
0 GBP, 0 USD, 0 rupees, 0 won, 0 pesos, 0 euros.
I didn't personally get paid for participating. As far as I'm aware, nobody did, to be honest. Like, just participating isn't enough. Who knows if I got the ultimate pay? We don't know.
Obviously, it's not like contestants were being neglected or abused like in the original show. Producers just recognized the reality that having one chance to change your life forever with the universally understood symbol of wealth creates immediate drama and conflict, and the show was immediately hit by reports that contestants were neglected and abused. Nobody could have predicted this.
I think that the last round of people to make it through ended up playing for almost 8 hours. Every single time that they stopped the clock, I mean, we were standing there for like 20 between 20 and 45 minutes, and I know because I counted the seconds because I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to pass the time. This is me after passing red light, green light, and your girl was cold. Someone from production told us afterwards that it was 24 degrees and we were literally just wearing those green tracksuits and like slip-on bands. So they show that girl in the squat and it's like, okay, she can't hold a squat for like 10 seconds or whatever. No, it was literally like probably 30, 45 minutes, however long she was holding that squat for.
The whole body's shaking, and some of the shots of the people in those still positions were amazing.
There was also another smaller scale recreations of the show in a real world context, piggybacking off of Squid Game's global success, many of which were also met with reports of poor treatment of the contestants. By the lead up to Squid Game Season 2, we had Cadbury Chocolate Squid Game, Squid Game Noodles, Squid Game Duolingo, Delivery App Squid Game, Squid Game Kia Sportage, Squid Game McDonald's, Squid Game Call of Duty, Squid Game Puma, Squid Game Crocs, Squid Game Immersive Experience in collaboration with Samsung. And then Squid Game Season 2 came out. And I mean, it was good. I'll be upfront that a large part of this video was motivated by seeing a lot of dismissive opinions on Squid Game in light of Season 2 and finding them kind of frustrating. Specifically, Ennio Austin is my enemy and I challenge him to mortal combat. Mostly I just have a lot of sympathy for the creator, and I do feel in a lot of criticism like this, he is being unfairly blamed for things that were outside of his control. But I also can't deny a part of why these takes bothered me so much is because I kind of agree with them. It's the reason I'm giving all this context before I talk about the season itself. It's a little bit hard to ignore. The way corporations and influencers and Netflix itself have cashed in on Squid Game just seems to so obviously deflate everything it's trying to say. It's kind of like making a show about exploitation and then hiring an actor who was arrested for child exploitation. Sorry, I think I skipped ahead.
Which one is it? Where?
Just last year, Duolingo left large numbers of translators jobless after abrupt mass layoffs to replace them with AI, because the thing Duolingo needed was definitely less quality control. Kia and its parent company Hyundai are involved in a class action lawsuit after claims one of their suppliers engaged in labor trafficking and racketeering, exploiting cheap migrant labor on short-term visas, purportedly using the threat of losing those visas to pay them less money on longer hours than US and non-Hispanic workers. Wow, this commercial is so spooky, like Squid Game.
I'm busy now, we'll talk later.
Call of Duty QA staff have protested after a mandate by publisher Activision that all workers must work from the office, including those with serious medical conditions and doctor recommendations specifically to work from home. This was following another lawsuit that resulted in a $54 million settlement after claims of workplace harassment, sexual misconduct, and pay inequalities. Look, a Squid Game gun! Just Eat, like Uber Eats and other delivery apps, is often known for preying on low-income workers with poor working conditions and unrealistic expectations of the money that they'll make. For some reason, Reddit keeps putting random delivery app communities on my feed, and I feel like every other week a post pops up where someone gloats about making a ton of money doing deliveries through the app, and then you go to the comments and it turns out they were actually working 6 AM to midnight every day and made less than minimum wage when you factor in fuel costs.
24 hours, non-stop. Challenge. Yeah. Success.
Or were just fake posts to make those apps look more appealing. But it's fine, because in the ad, the people dressed as the tortured contestants are the ones making the orders. Which makes sense. And aside from the whole direct marketing fast food addictions to children problem, McDonald's has a pretty long history of human rights issues and worker exploitation, being taken to court over wage theft, union busting, lack of adequate standards leading to a culture of abuse and sexual harassment, and, to repeat myself, violating child labor laws. The chocolate industry is bad for reasons I've already addressed in previous videos. And can you guess which countries Samsung has been heavily criticized for union suppression and toxic and harmful work environments? That's right, it's India, and also South Korea. This is just like Squid Game.
The protester guards pretend to beat up a person in the tracksuit costume of a Squid Game player, but wearing a mask to look like Jae-young Lee, vice chairman of South Korean electronics company Samsung.
This is not an exhaustive list of everything that would make an association between Squid Game and these companies extremely ironic. If your takeaway is that Squid Game basically just amounted to an aesthetic for corporations to seem down with the kids without having to actually address any issues, that's pretty reasonable. Being cynical about this is the most normal possible reaction. But this isn't just regular cynicism. This is advanced cynicism. Fuck Squid Game itself, which clearly didn't do a good enough job at expressing itself in a way that wasn't so easy to co-opt and commercialize. Fuck Netflix for their total lack of basic respect for artists and desperate money grabbing, and fuck capitalism for its constant recuperation of any radical message. Disco Elysium quote, Disco Elysium quote, Disco Elysium quote. Hey, did you hear what happened to Disco Elysium? But if we're saying the actions of Netflix speak to this fundamental failure of capitalism, don't we have to accept that on some level Squid Game speaks to a fundamental failure of art? Maybe art itself, so easy to reduce to content and aesthetic, is just a meaningless pop culture distraction in the face of real world issues, inequality and rampant corporate greed. Because how can we really say that Squid Game could have been made in a way that would have made this not happen? Or if trying to do that wouldn't have destroyed its potential to reach that many people in the first place? Maybe there is only one real solution to this problem. Luigi Mangione is a 26-year-old. You two, please don't take away my channel. I feel like this is a good time to talk about Squid Game Season 2. Here's what I imagine Squid Game viewers would have expected from the start of a second season. Following directly from the cliffhanger left in Season 1, Ji-hoon turns down an opportunity to walk away after being the only known survivor of the original games. Ji-hoon dedicates himself to hunting down the Squid Gamers and putting a stop to the challenges forever, putting all of his time and resources to serve this end. Eventually tracks down the ominous Soup Man, and either deliberately or through being caught in some kind of trap, winds up landing himself right back into the Squid Game 2. If you've seen Squid Game Season 2, this probably sounds familiar because it's actually exactly what happens.
Player 456. Welcome back to the game.
A lot of early beats in this season are pretty much just what you'd expect, and to be clear, that's not a criticism. Not all stories need to constantly subvert our expectations. I am definitely not criticizing the predictable move of immediately walking back the red-haired eye. And on the whole, I actually think this general straightforwardness to the story works with what the season is saying. Ji-hoon's plans feel basically plucked from a comment section of viewers suggesting how to go about stopping the game. Getting some kind of tracker in place so that either law enforcement or a private militia or a combination of both can go on the offensive, and when that doesn't work, he does the second best thing and just immediately starts trying to sabotage the games from within. He confesses to the players that he's already been there, giving advice that dramatically reduces the threat of the challenges while also making it as clear as possible to everyone involved just how merciless these games will get.
Just think for a second. Can't you see what's going on? These aren't regular games we're playing. If we don't stop this, they'll kill us all!
And this coincides with a major difference from how the game was organized in Season 1. This time, the vote for players to opt out of the game isn't just something that happens early on, it happens every day. So you'd expect if the show is changing an aspect of the game, that reflects the show is also going to be commenting on a slightly different subject. Which is pretty important when there was already skepticism about the new season being a cash grab retread, when the creator has openly said he didn't really have a strong idea for a story going into it. Well, so if the second season is emphasizing choice, players constantly voting to keep playing the games, one issue is that the first season was already to a large extent about choice. Like I say, it also had a whole plot built around contestants actively deciding not to keep playing the game and then going back to it anyway because they realize regular everyday exploitation is barely better than gambling it all on a potential fortune. Characters making choices to either go out of their way to help others or look out for themselves remains a large part of the conflict. The climax of the show involves Ji-hoon's childhood friend choosing to sacrifice himself because Ji-hoon refuses to make the choice to kill him.
I can't.
And that's after the same friend had chosen to butcher another contestant in cold blood. This is itself followed up by Ji-hoon effectively betting the soul of the human race on whether someone chooses to help a man dying in the streets.
Look at that. There's someone who cares. You saw that, didn't you? You saw that you lost.
I don't think Squid Game could talk about the issues it does without bringing up free will. You may have noticed I've been using a lot of language so far that really assumes you're on board with the basic message of Squid Game, the idea of capitalism as an inevitably exploitative economic system. When I say people saw Squid Game as a way to talk about how they feel exploited, how they feel abused, overworked, and underpaid in a society that favors a callous elite billionaire class, I'm assuming you agree that this is a valuable message worth sharing. It's a fairly basic Marxist idea of exploitation, that those who own our industries extract value from the working class to benefit themselves while putting more and more pressure on those workers. Corporations use their influence to profit on lax government oversight, and suddenly people are working harder in worse conditions with no union protection, and half their paycheck goes to rent or healthcare. And this brings us to 26-year-old Luigi Mangione. You could, not think that. You could disagree that this is exploitative, because you have free will. It's one thing to be against slavery, but capitalism isn't a slave society. Workers aren't indentured servants, unless they're in prison. If you don't like your job, you can quit. And if you want to make money, yes, that requires you to work hard doing occasionally unpleasant things. If work was always fun, you wouldn't need to pay people to do it. This is just being an adult. Tired of having no money? Choose to be more financially responsible. Want to get paid more? Grind. Make yourself someone people need to pay more because they need the thing that you can do. Be your own boss. Obviously, everybody's gonna have advantages and disadvantages in life, but why obsess over things you can't control? What is in your control is whether you're going to let yourself be exploited. Choose not to be a slave. I'm going to vomit. I'm sorry you had to hear that. But the thing is, this is basically the default way we're taught to think. The truths that are drilled into us like the rules of a children's game. The people at the top have earned their way there, and if you aren't one of them, you're just not as good. You're not working smart or hard enough, and you need to do better. It's the basic foundation of society, in large part because, frankly, it's just way easier for those people at the top to take advantage of you if they can convince you to feel ashamed of wanting to be paid more or work less or really complain about any part of your situation. Constant paranoia about if it's your own fault that you seem to be struggling so much more than other people, because after all, you have free will. The job you have is the one you chose. The life you live is the one you selected.
You all put your signatures on the agreement, and you all made your decision to come back on your own.
This is, of course, and I believe this is a French phrase, stupid bullshit.
We only created it. All of you chose to participate in a game of your own free will.
That's a load of shit and you know it.
The material conditions you're born into have an obvious impact on the choices you have in life. Most people don't get a small loan of $1 million or a family who owns slave mines. Most people will remain in the economic class they were born into. You don't choose to be born in a country where you might end up buried under massive medical debt. You don't choose to lose loved ones and be forced to support a family on a single income. You don't choose mental illness or addiction or living through multiple economic recessions before the age of 18. And when the choice is terrible work versus poverty, homelessness, death, or even worse, any of those things for your loved ones, isn't really a choice. Please tell those migrant workers that they can just choose to quit their exploitative job and immediately lose their visas. Please tell my mom that if she was struggling to raise me on a single income, to just retrain to a higher paying field, when even a week without money would have left us with no electricity or hot water. I think this is what made Squid Game such a useful shorthand. This isn't just a story about random acts of horrific torture. There is no easy out to say there's no comparison to our own world because at least we get a choice. They did too. Ultimately, the horror isn't even really the game. It's the society that makes choosing to play the game make sense. But you already knew all this, right? Squid Game Season 2 may retread old territory in some ways, but in doing that, I think it actually ends up exposing a tension. A tension I think has been hanging over the show since the reaction to the first season. In the first episode of Season 2, Ji-hoon stalks the recruiter, the mysterious suit man who first brought him into the game. And the recruiter, it turns out, is also a strange boy. We see him in his off time play a game with some homeless people, offering them the choice between bread and a lottery ticket. Look man, everyone's got hobbies. And when they choose the lottery ticket, he snatches away the food, and when they don't win, stamps it all to the ground for the sheer thrill of it. The analogy's pretty straightforward. Desperate people choosing a minute chance of a way out of their situation versus the guarantee of something small that will benefit them but not meaningfully change their conditions. Basically, the same situation as choosing the Squid Game over everyday poverty. And the recruiter revels in this because it tells him something about these people of a lower status than him. They're idiots.
I'm not the one here who wasted this. That was you people.
They're degenerate gamblers, too stupid or lazy to make anything of themselves, who rely on cheating the system through luck because they are simply inferior to him. Exactly what people need to hear to feel comfortable with an unequal society. And then eventually he comes face to face with Jikan, and he makes them play a game, Russian roulette. And it feels kind of stupid that they're even doing it when, as the recruiter himself points out, Jikan could at any time turn around and just shoot the guy if he doesn't want to deal with the chance of dying. But he keeps playing because both of them have something to prove.
If you want to meet the person you were talking about earlier, the key's here in my pocket. All you have to do is shoot me with that gun and then it's yours. If you do though, you'll have to admit one thing to me. You're trash and just as worthless as everyone else.
If Jikan breaks the rules, he's proving he's just another gambler who relied on luck and cheating the system to win. If the recruiter breaks the rules, he's proving he's just another lapdog following his master's orders, unable to face an honest defeat. And the whole time they're doing this, I couldn't help think of one thing. In both cases, doesn't this just prove the opposite? How is Jikan proving he isn't just a gambler who relies on luck when he's specifically playing a game that relies entirely on luck? How is the recruiter proving he isn't just an obedient lapdog when he is literally willing to kill himself before violating the sanctity of some bullshit rules to a dumb, meaningless game? Jikan gets to have his cool moment where he beats the guy at his own game and forces him to die in disgrace, but the message I took was pretty different from the one stated by the characters. None of this proved anything. It was a game with arbitrary rules, given meaning only by the people who want to justify why it's being played in the first place. Nobody needed to go hungry to prove a point. Nobody had to die. And I'd say more than anything, it's this trap that Jikan consistently falls into throughout Season 2, trying to beat the Squid Game's hosts at their own game, hoping that through some kind of elaborate plan or sabotage or just making people aware enough of what's happening, he can break it and walk away satisfied like he did with the recruiter.
Just focus on getting out of this place. And to do that, we need to win the vote. We can stop this here and now!
And I think in a lot of ways, Jikan is functioning as a reflection of the show itself, of Hwang Dong-hyuk's original intentions. I think Hwang recognized something in the cultural impact left by the first Squid Game. In the end, it was the games themselves that stuck with people. With the voting portion of the story isolated to episode 2, an episode which I think many viewers basically ignore because it largely takes place outside of the game, that message also fades. I'd argue not making the vote a core part of the game to begin with was a mistake. Anytime the game is removed from the context of being something the contestants choose to take part in, I think it does a lot to detract from the message. Recuperation, the act of twisting radical popular ideas into something neutral and innocent, is much easier without this element of choice. Most people agree that torturing innocent people is wrong. It's when you add in the element of free will, suddenly people have to question if they still think of the person as innocent when they've chosen to accept the torture, and only at that point question their feelings on the torture in the first place. Like, hypothetically, how many people would be okay with someone getting paid to be kept isolated in a windowless room for days on end where the lights are never turned off and sometimes they get woken up in the middle of the night to run random marathon challenges and
going through these crazy challenges that you saw before applying and when you applied that you knew what was happening. So that's like, you know, you don't get princess treatment when you're out there in the wilderness surviving and trying to make, you know, I think that's just people complaining because, you know, they're saucy, they got out.
I was watching the new season of Severance while editing this and felt like it was appropriate to bring up in the context of this recuperation point. Timestamp to skip spoilers for Severance Season 2. There you go. So to skip a lot of details, that show also has a major plot point that involves some horrific treatment of workers by a large corporation being criticized. And Season 2 introduces the idea of that corporation responding by making the work environment slightly more hospitable, completely skipping over the power dynamic that made it so easy for the workers to be treated this way in the first place. And we see again how this emphasis solely on the details of the harmful behavior and not on the conditions that led to people accepting it in the first place leads to this glazing over of actually fixing what was so broken, the structure itself. As long as we can imagine things could be even worse, maybe in the end things aren't so bad after all. You see the point. It's not just the conditions we're trying to question, it's what makes people choose the conditions. And the focus on the Squid Game itself is both a problem with how the show is often remembered and with the character of Jikan. Here he is with massive resources at his disposal and his obsession is strictly with getting people out of the game, which it turns out he can't do. Every single time the vote comes up, players decide to keep going. Jihoon, like his creator, finds himself in a position where his influence is greater than he could have possibly imagined, and it's not enough. This isn't the root of the problem.
We want you to feel empowered to exercise this right in a free and democratic manner.
You stood by and watched them kill all those people. And you still want to go on? You think you won't be the next one to die?
One contestant is a veteran whose untreated PTSD have made it difficult or impossible to hold down stable finances. One is a father who needs to pay for treatment of his daughter's blood cancer. One is a trans woman suffering from her own persecution who needs the money to finance her transition. One is an influencer who became the fall guy for a crypto scam that left him as a fugitive in severe debt. One is a businessman in so much debt that the payout wouldn't even be worth it unless the number of players were cut down significantly. Then there's Thanos. Thanos is also in debt, but I'm pretty sure he'd still be playing the game just for fun. Jihoon is working from limited information and a narrow-minded perspective. There isn't going to be this moment where everyone realizes how bad the Squid Game is and then decides to call the whole thing off. They know completely that this whole thing is cruel and unfair, and even if a lot of them are willing to stand up and turn against the game, most just want to get through it. Jihoon is as powerless as Hwang Dong-hyuk is as powerless as Squid Game is powerless. So that's nice. There is an undercurrent of cynicism within the season that I think is easy to identify with. This is a very easy time to become cynical. The world is actually on fire. Billionaires rule the planet. The fucking Department of Education is about to get dismantled. They're trying to deplatform Wikipedia. Because whoa. I'm sorry if you thought I wasn't going to mention politics while talking about the show. What the fuck? And none of this is some secret, hidden, dark conspiracy. They're standing right there, directly saying their intentions every day, right on your feed. I was honestly kind of disappointed that the twist of Squid Game Season 2 wasn't the show just going full The Boys. Like when Homelander just gives up the act and starts blatantly murdering people and everyone starts cheering. I half expected the reveal that the Squid Games are no longer even a secret, that they're just broadcasting it to the world. Maybe being hosted by some kind of influencer.
You act like you're running a charity event.
And people are just fine with it because, you know, it is a lot of money and they did agree to the game. Yeah, I guess I'm quite cynical lately. But I think cynicism alone can also be quite self-defeating. And I think if that was all I got from Squid Game Season 2, I probably wouldn't have liked it as much. I think it does have more to say. While Squid Game has always presented a generally negative view on the world, it's also always had a lot of emphasis on the humanity of its characters. These characters bond with each other and reveal more about themselves, and in doing so give you a reason to care about their struggles beyond just the basic situation they're in. Hyunju is a phenomenal sympathetic character who I honestly feel could have taken over as the cast lead. I will acknowledge here the criticism of her role being played by a cis man. I have read the justifications that South Korean trans women are heavily marginalized, that it would have been difficult to find a trans actress willing to draw that much attention to themselves. At the end of the day, I am neither South Korean or trans, so I can only see the trans community overwhelmingly disagree with this decision, and a lot of Korean viewers disagreeing that it really would have been so impossible to get a trans person into the role and take them at their word. This was a mistake. Maybe not to the same level as hiring an actor arrested for meeting with prostituted minors, but I don't think it's a competition. These are issues it would have felt wrong not to address in this video, even if they are something outside of the show itself. But within the show, I think it's easy to end up rooting for its characters, not just to win these games, but to somehow end up in a scenario where they all get to win. Something which we know won't happen because of the nature of the game. This isn't the kind of cynical world where everyone's just an asshole and global misery feels inevitable, if not deserved. In fact, even when we do see more stereotypically evil characters, we're seeing how their own success is just a product of the game's design. The most cutthroat players are inevitably the ones pushing through to the end, only stacking things more against the players who are happy to share a modest prize with a larger pool of survivors. An entire plot point is built around the host turning a blind eye so contestants can just start butchering murdering each other in their sleep. At one point, a game is played that is built around choosing who to violently eject from rooms that will only save players when the correct number of people are in them. This obviously benefits players who can disconnect themselves from any shame or guilt from leaving someone else to die. These are the ones who live. Even with the choices presented to the players, the games are designed to work against them. Okay, so I can't not bring up that Beast Games literally does the same exact social pressure, emotional torture challenge and focuses on it intensely for most of an episode.
I'm in a literal insane asylum room. I'm gonna start banging on the wall!
I accept full consequences for my actions.
You never thought it'd come to this, having to go against your own brother.
I know you guys are all very good friends. So good luck on choosing a person to leave. Start the timer!
But seeing a young mum being trapped for hours in a room with two brothers while they gang up on her over and over again into walking away from the show.
I'm with two brothers and they already told me I was going to be the one going home. They told me this earlier.
Barely willing to even play any game that might have made this a somewhat fair decision. Just endless jabs while they laugh openly behind her back as she's clearly having a breakdown from this obviously fucked up, unfair situation.
So I don't want to get bullied into it.
Which Mr. Beast joins in with.
Whoa.
With no attempt from the production to step in and prevent this woman being openly bullied by two guys who are fully aware it would have been the easiest decision in the world for one of them to just walk the fuck away. I was originally going to do a full comparison of these shows, but I stopped watching after this episode because most of the shows seem built around just forcing anyone with any kindness to constantly sacrifice themselves and causing people as much emotional pain as possible, and it just felt disgusting to keep going. You're an evil person. But at a certain point, I know my outrage in both cases comes from empathy. And empathy, I know, is not unique to me. What it highlights is that even in a cold world, we don't need to be cold to each other. Many of these characters are in some way at fault. People who are financially irresponsible, gamblers themselves, or even who have actively scammed others. There's even a subplot about a woman growing into a role as one of the masked assistants in the games, demonstrating the kind of mind-shattering disassociation that people can will themselves into when they feel it's their only option. And even including the ones who seem completely victimized in their situations, they are still complicit in the game. Even more sympathetic characters like Hyunju initially vote to keep going. I think it's that this season ends up highlighting, the thing that Ji-hoon is missing from the start. The need to survive.
I owed more than 500 million when I lost my business. For us to have a chance, I need to make it out with at least half that. You could start again someday. I don't have that choice.
It's easy to look at any human being trying to navigate a deeply cynical world and see a hypocrite. All of us are hypocrites. You either work for a company you know does bad things, or you give money to companies you know do bad things. You eat food and wear clothes that come from places where you know bad things happen. I'm sorry if you felt attacked when I said bad things about your Kia Sportage. I promise you're not a bad person because you occasionally enjoy a McNugget. I work for YouTube. I do sponsorships I often don't really want to do. I did a Raid Shadow Legends sponsorship once. It was a bad time. We all try to do the best we can. Hwang Dong-hyuk took the deal he did with Netflix because that was the deal on the table. He allowed the space for his anti-capitalist work to be distorted into yet another tool for the corporate accumulation of capital. What a hypocrite. And he even admitted making money as a primary motivation for the art he makes. I thought art was made by magical fairies who aren't subject to the same financial pressures as everybody else. The more we look at the reality of the situation, the conditions we're pressured into, the more we see how small-minded it is to think of these problems as rooted in individual choices or any isolated injustice. And when we're put against each other like this, of course it brings out the worst parts of us. It highlights those hypocrisies, the ways we are all deep down predatory beings who care more about ourselves than anyone else. When it comes down to it, everyone wants to survive, and most people don't want to sacrifice themselves for a stranger. That's normal, and the problem is that nobody should be in a position where they have to make those choices in the first place. ultimately we do anyway, and that choice could be as direct as letting someone die for yourself, or as abstract as indirectly fueling an industry that exploits thousands of people in small ways every day. What Squid Game did was highlight this dynamic, and what Squid Game Season 2 did was perfectly isolate the important points that came across in the first show, while leaving behind the things that made it so easy to co-opt into corporate sludge in the first place. The focus on our individual choices is a distraction. The problem is not the choice of whether we pull the lever on the train tracks, it's that someone tied people to the tracks to begin with. Sure, it's easy to get a cheap dunk and say it all just sucks because it's all another way for evil, greedy people to make money. Evil, greedy people will make money out of anything. That is the reality for people who want to make things without the privilege of living in the rich people utopia. But the fact is, an artist wanted to express something about the world to reach people, and that's what art is. Expression, communication of something. It bears mentioning that Squid Game Season 2 is very much an incomplete story, and I would want to revisit it when it comes back. But if that second half is anything like this, I don't just think it's a worthwhile follow-up to Season 1, I think it's an improvement and a necessary companion to the original show. Hopefully I've done enough to say that if there is a problem with Squid Game, it's not because Squid Game itself didn't have enough to say in the first place. Popular or not, I think it is a meaningful and worthwhile story that does have the potential to spread global consciousness to a degree I think few pieces of popular media are able. Did I do something wrong? There was something I alluded to at the start that's a lot harder to defend than just one show. It's every show. It's every movie. It's every creative work you've ever connected with or enjoyed. And this might feel like a diversion, but I think if I'm going to talk about this subject, I need to get into it. I was stuck on how to talk about this subject for a long time before a headline popped up on my feed. I don't really need to sell people on David Lynch. His influence on filmmaking has been immense, and the outpouring of love for him and his work has been so overwhelming that it feels kind of redundant to even add to it. Yes, like millions of other people, Lynch had a profound impact on me, both in his creative work and his life philosophy.
Wilson, how many times have I told you? This is what we do in the FBI!
I have struggled a lot with expressing myself in a way I feel is authentically me. I tend to be very self-conscious and cater everything I write and make to what I imagine my audience wants from me. I've considered myself a creative person my whole life, but I have few complete projects to show for it. Doubt constantly fills my mind on what might be seen as too confusing or boring or pretentious. Lynch didn't work this way. Lynch wasn't afraid of leaving his audience confused if that was what he wanted to make. He's always been vocal that his greatest artistic regret was his version of Dune, specifically because he wasn't given full creative control. When he made a follow-up to Twin Peaks, one of his only commercially successful works, he didn't make fan service that pandered to every question viewers had lingering since the end of the original show. He made a disorienting, uncomfortable meditation on domestic and childhood abuse with no satisfying conclusion and even more unanswered questions. And despite my intense respect for Lynch, and despite how much I admire him and everything he did, a thought still passed through me when I heard about his death. Sucks that there won't be another season of Twin Peaks. It feels embarrassing to ever see someone react to the death of an actual human being by saying how sad they are that they won't be able to keep making things for them. I am incredibly embarrassed I had this thought. Even more so because I know part of that came from wanting to see a satisfying conclusion to 2017's Twin Peaks: The Return. I won't spoil it in detail, but again, it follows in the trend of Lynch's work, often leaving a lot of unanswered questions. I, as a viewer, wanted to feel like I was satisfied, like I had been catered to. An impulse that betrays both Lynch's humanity and the whole philosophy of his work. But while one part of me knows it's a very cringe and childish thought to have, there's another part that thinks that this isn't really an unusual feeling to have when artists we greatly admire pass away. David Lynch didn't just make products to consume, he made art. And I am sad that I will never get to see any new art that he might have wanted to make. Either way, I have to respect that as an artist, Twin Peaks: The Return was what he wanted to make. There was no strong indication there would have ever even been a follow-up. He wanted to leave the audience unsettled. This is very much in line with playwright Bertolt Brecht's concept of the distancing effect, not allowing the audience to remain passive and comfortable as they absorb their work. Brecht was himself a Marxist who fled Nazi persecution, then had to flee persecution by the US government after years of surveillance by the FBI for suspected communistic anti-American views. It was very much part of his intent that audiences treat his art as something that challenged them, especially in the case of social or moral issues. When every story ends in a neat bow that makes you feel warm inside, it's easy to come away feeling generally content with the world as it is. When you're not being challenged, you don't have to think as much about what a piece of art meant to you or how it might contradict things you previously believed. Effectively, the art returns to being mere product, a fun distraction. If you've been following my channel for a while, you'll remember I had a lot of beef with the concept of objective film quality, the idea of reducing art to a checklist of correct and incorrect ways to tell a story. And on a basic level, those measurements inevitably come back to an idea. The audience is king. Give them what they want. Satisfy their desires.
The algorithm felt it wasn't hitting the right taste clusters.
And in that world, people like Brecht or Lynch couldn't exist. Squid Game is a more conventional piece of art than most things either of those men made, with a lot of similarities to other work people have already pointed out. The Hunger Games, Battle Royale, and it fits well with the current trend of rich people bad cinema catering to a similar redwashing vibe, a trend that was in part set off by the global acclaim of Parasite, a film that undeniably led to a recent increased interest in South Korean filmmaking in the West.
감독님이 기생충으로 앞에 문을 좀 열어놓으신 덕이 아닌가 하는 생각을 합니다.
I think there's a push and pull in the way art that's widely accessible to a large audience is often less brave in what it's doing. Considering the utter lack of control Hwang Dong-hyuk had over Squid Game, I'd still say he did the best he could. But even if it isn't groundbreaking cinema, it's still undeniably art, with a genuine desire to challenge the way we see the world. Not just a product built from the ground up to leave its viewers happy and complicit. None of this changes the fact that, as I've said a lot of times on this channel, we live in a material reality. Not all products are necessarily art, but art is a product. Large-scale productions require investment. Investment requires financial interest, and that interest comes from there being something in the work that appeals to an audience. This line, where a product exists to make money and art exists out of the pure unbridled spirit of the artist, is nice and easy, but it's also kind of a lie. That itself would be another neat bow to wrap around our relationship with capital, to again reduce everything to a choice about making real art or slop. The point, again, is that these pressures infect all our decisions as individuals. A lot of art you love was probably made in part for a paycheck. That's not a betrayal, that's people trying to survive.
You stupid monkey!
But this still leaves the art itself in a weird, powerless position. Squid Game, available on Netflix as Netflix Squid Games, the creator of Squid Game. Anti-capitalism, sponsored by Amazon Prime. The Boys satirizes Trump, while Jeff Bezos stands next to Trump at his inauguration. I also couldn't not add here that this empty corporate aesthetic support for social or economic justice has always been heavily contingent. Something we're seeing more and more as corporations pander increasingly to an incredibly sensitive conservative demographic, with dwindling support for LGBT or minority group representation as it trends out with the anti-woke audience. I'd be shocked if Netflix didn't end up reining in shows like Squid Game in a desperate attempt to cater to this crowd. Obviously, this kind of support should never be based on what's trending or what can be used as easy rage bait, but it is, because, to repeat myself, corporations in the long run don't give a fuck about anything beyond stimulating a profit. That's what they're designed to do. We live in a world of increasing urgency. We have already long passed the point where the most extreme outcomes of climate change are avoidable. And the response by the most powerful people on the planet has been to pander to the world's dumbest fascists. What is art's place in this, when it seems like any popular form of it is inevitably stripped of all meaning to become just another income source for these same people financing our extinction? I go back to this problem I have with the way we try to distinguish art from product. When we try to separate art from a thing that generates money, we also separate product from any soul or meaning. A person is the product of two people creating life. We are all in a constant state of production. As Gilles Deleuze once put it, production is not an activity, it's a process, and its product is also a process. This existed before corporations and will hopefully exist after them. The problem isn't production, it's the way the means of that production is currently controlled by an elite class for the purpose of profit. Capitalism does not oppose production, but appropriates it by assigning it a form and limits. David Lynch was a huge supporter of transcendental meditation and made analogies about creativity as fishing while in a state of meditating. Out of consciousness, we pull fish or ideas, and the deeper we go, the closer we get to catching the big one. Squid Game was Hwang Dong-hyuk's big fish, pulled from a consciousness that was the result of his conditions. It was the story he wanted to tell, and he used the paths available to him to tell it. We can't separate this from the motivations he might have had to make this art, because that's part of his conditions. This feeling of hypocrisy, of contradiction and shame about his own will to survive, that is Squid Game.
You don't feel any guilt for what you did, do you? It's yours now. The cash is your reward for your hard work and luck, and you have every right to use it now.
So this question, is art just an empty distraction in our current society? Does it have a purpose beyond the profit of the privileged? Is a faulty one. Art emerges and has always emerged from human consciousness. It's a production that's as natural to us as breathing air. Reducing art to a simple, objective, practical utility would be doing the same thing capitalism does, assigning it a clear form and limit. Art can influence and inspire as much as any part of the world around us, but it can't act for us. Squid Game only failed if you thought it was going to do something art isn't made to do. If its treatment by wider society frustrates or upsets you, you now probably feel just the way Hwang did when he was making the show. And if that sparks something in your own consciousness, then I look forward to seeing what emerges out of that. This might not be a satisfying answer to you, maybe because you're still unsatisfied with the world this video is a product of. To be honest, I always struggle a lot with my conclusions because I often feel like when I tie my own videos in a neat bow, I'm also encouraging my audience to be more complicit, not to think too much about what I'm saying on their own terms. And this is tough when, for many people, a clear conclusion is how they decide if an essay actually had something to say. I have to leave it to you if you thought I had anything to say, and whether that lingering unease you feel as a result of my own bad writing or because of something you feel about the current state of things. I can't fix that for you. I can only tell you what I wanted to say. Also, I already said that Brecht thing about not giving people a nice, comfortable ending to things, so hey, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please consider backing us over on Patreon or Ko-fi to be on the credits that are scrolling by now. My next, I don't really know what I wanted to say. The end here. I love you. My next video is probably also going to be about a Netflix show, criticizing a Netflix show. Okay, thank you. Bye. We all live in a Squid Game. Running away from the Squid Game. Hang on. Swimming away from the Squid Game. Have you ever been a squid? Squid's on a game. You don't know that the squid is a game. And they game the squid until you win the Squid Games. Thank you.